Welcome back. When Hudson's Bay was closing its doors in Canada, it liquidated its store inventory. It's often one of the last steps on the way down. And for our next guest, that means when business is bad for some, it's good for them. Alex Hennick is president of AD Hennick and Associates. Alex, thanks for being with us.
Thank you for having me.
So there's this feeling, Hudson's Bay obviously seemed like in some ways a long time coming, but there is this feeling that there's a traditional category of retailer that is just struggling now. Is that borne out by what you're seeing in the market?
Yeah, it's a different time. A lot of retailers, especially that old traditional retailer who doesn't adapt. It's a different world nowadays. People are not going to stores as much. And in general, everything's changing, what people are buying. And so I think it's just there's massive changes in terms of the retail landscape.
The process that you play a role in, which is the liquidation part, is that's not good news for a company in the sense that they're trying to get every dollar they can for debtors. But they obviously, you can raise a fair amount of money, I imagine. And in fact, there's extra inventory that can be sold in the process. Can you explain how that works?
Yeah, so I mean, in terms of using the Bay as an example, when you're running these store closing liquidation sales, you're utilizing whatever assets you have left in order to make as much money as possible so that you can pay back the creditors. Throughout this process, sometimes the liquidation companies will even add more inventory to the sale based on how much traffic and how many people are in the stores. So it is a great opportunity to mitigate, what is owed to the creditors.
In terms of how the market's shifting, I mean, as you say, it feels as though some of the traditional big box brick and mortar stores, the department store especially, is sort of going away. Are you seeing a kind of a concurrent strength in other categories that will make up for the loss of some of those retailers?
Yes and no. It's tough. Like people, I would say, are more reluctant to spend these days. They're spending more on things they need versus on things they want. There has been massive changes really since COVID. We've seen a big change the years after with how good sales were during 2020 and 2021. But I don't know if there's, other ones taking in and getting, the advantage of the losses for others. But there is definitely a big opportunity.
Which, of course, people do move in on. We do have this particular buyer for some of the Bay's locations, for instance, but already seeing signs of a struggle there. There's a sort of a pattern, Alex, and we see this in other sectors like restaurants where something has failed and there's somebody else who says, well, maybe I can make a go of this. How often is that a repeat failure in your view? There's a reason why it went down.
Yeah, exactly. I think you said it. Especially in this situation, I think on the smaller scale, a lot of companies could adapt and, make the changes necessary. But for a historic retailer that's been around for so many years and for Ruby Lou to come and take over the existing leases and run a similar business model or, what we think might be, it doesn't make sense to a lot. And I think that's why there is a tremendous pushback from a lot of these landlords saying, as much as she has the dollars and willing to take over the leases, we're just not so sure she's going to be here long term because I don't think a lot of people believe in the business model. All
right, got to leave it there. Great to have you with us.
Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it.
Alex Hennick is president of AD Hennick and Associates. Time for the takeaway and crying over unspilled milk. Once again, the U.S. has signaled clearly that it finds Canada's protection of its dairy market to be unfair, a trade irritant that the president seems personally irritated by. Given that our trade teams are probably holed up somewhere in Washington as we speak, a new Trump tweet about dairy is a sure sign that it's on the table in those talks. And that should not be surprising. Canada's system of supply management for dairy and poultry and eggs is one that many countries take issue with. It's one reason the UK walked away from negotiations of a post-Brexit agreement with Canada. There are many ways to support homegrown industry that wouldn't run afoul of our trading partners. So why does Canada insist on supply management? Because, make no mistake, we do insist. The recently passed Bill C-202 was a resurrected version of a law that died when Parliament was prorogued. In other words, it could have been left well enough alone. Instead, a new bill was rushed into law this summer. The law makes it illegal for our trade negotiators to put dairy on the table at all. And while you might think that's a bit short-sighted, tying the hands of all future trade negotiators, it's a law that had unanimous support in Parliament. How dairy became a sacred cow in Canada is more about politics than nutrition or support for business. It's no coincidence that the vast majority of the farms affected are in Quebec, and that Quebec often acts as kingmaker in Canadian elections. But beyond the political rationale, it's hard to find any other for this outdated policy. Is milk somehow special in a way that Canadian beef is not? When there's plenty of evidence that dairy products cost Canadian consumers more than they would if imports in this market looked more like imports in other ones. Maybe there's a way around Bill 202, which includes changing U.S. quotas for the Canadian market. If not, all Canadians will pay the price for this policy. My takeaway? Holding a whole trade deal hostage to one sliver of the economy feels illogical. But then we've been holding consumers hostage to that same sliver for decades. That's Taking Stock for this week. I'm Amanda Lang. Thanks for being with us.